Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. It is Allie Rittenhouse here with the lovely Andrea Owen. I'm not sure which way this way. Nope. There she is. So if you are here today, we are here to talk about her brand new book that is coming out on January 2nd about how to stop feeling like shit. Right. I think we all could use this advice. Andrea, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Allie. I'm always a pleasure to talk to you and, of course, talk about the book. And I'm super, super stoked to be here.
And I love the cover. It has confetti.
Oh, know, right?
Confetti is just as good as glitter.
It is. It is.
Probably a little easier to clean up than glitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just sweep it up.
Yes. So let's just tell you a little bit about Andrea. If you don't know Andrea, I've known her 6 or 7 years.
6 or 7 years, yeah.
Something like that. She's fantabulous. This is her second book that she just came out with. And she is an author, a mentor, a certified life coach who helps high-achieving women let go of perfectionism, control, and isolation, and choosing courage and confidence instead. And we all, this is such a timely thing, especially with everything that's going on right now. Helped thousands manage their inner critic to create loving connections and live their most kick-ass life. And that's what I love. We are here with one life and we got to live it kick-ass. Oh, and I forgot to do this. So we are for Andrea Owen interview with Allie Rittenhouse on December 15th. It is officially started. So welcome, Andrea.
Thank you, honey. That was lovely.
Thank you for being here. If you are watching today, say hello with a pineapple in the comments below.
Is that your favorite emoji?
It is.
I always ask people just to give me their favorite emoji because there's so many new ones. I like to be introduced to new ones. There's a cartwheel one and a fairy and head explosion.
Ooh.
Mermaid.
I love that one. I like pineapple. I have my golden pineapple back here. Do you know the quote about the pineapple?
No.
So it's stand tall, always stand tall, always wear a crown, and be sweet on the inside. Or I probably
that's cute.
But so that's why I like the
pineapple. I love it.
Always have a crown on and stand tall. So I'm going to just check our audio real quick. Everybody, thank you. Oh, sounds like it's working. Hopefully there's no backfeed there. So, Andrea, when did you start this book? While I get to
I started this book. Oh, that's a good question, Allie. I think I started it probably somewhere late 2015. And then the way traditional publishing works, the book proposal is a project in and of itself. So I started the book just a teeny bit, you do an outline, then you do, I told my agent about it, then wrote the proposal. And then once you sign a contract is when you actually the big work starts happening. And so that was most of 2016 that I spent writing this book.
Wow. And here we are coming into 2018.
Yeah, it takes a while. It takes a minute.
To anybody that's watching, because probably majority of the people are going to be entrepreneurs and female entrepreneurs that might eventually want to write a book. And I think that's great insight, myself included, to know that this isn't an overnight success thing. This is something that takes a ton of time and dedication and work. Happen.
Well, and some people look at that as a con of traditional publishing. And it really depends on what your goals are. If you are somebody who wants to write a book. And I think that now that I've done it twice, I know that it takes a long time because there are so many moving parts with the publication of a book. And they care a lot about what the end product is. Not saying that if you self-publish, that's not the case, but there are a lot of kind of cooks in the kitchen. The editing process alone takes months. And different people, and there's still typos at the end of the day. A lot of books still come out with typos, but all that to say, it takes a long time because it's so important, and there are so many different things that need to be taken care of.
Editing process. And, I just had to check our audio. Just to make sure, I heard me, but really I'm worried about Andrea, if everybody can hear her. And I think the editing, that is the thing that I am like the scared most about with it. And I think that's a great point of why maybe not to self-publish, because even somebody that you hire on your own, there could be even more. And that's my thing.
What scares you about the editing, that somebody else is going to like tell you like red pen all over your manuscript? Okay.
When I first was coming into this online business, I've had a few trials and tribulations, let's just say that. And when I went to take my VA certification, they basically told me that I would never be published, that I would never be able to write anything, and that it was horrible, and that I needed a lot of work. And I'm like, whatever, we're all human. So I think that has hindered me from thinking that I have the ability to do it. But I love video too. So video.
Yes. Video. But I think books will always be a thing. And here's the thing that's changed. And of course, this is my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. I am not an editor, nor do I own a publishing company. But here's what I've seen over the years. And publishing has changed. Yes, it has changed. And I think before, and when I say before, I mean like maybe even like in the 90s, early 2000s, it was a requirement that you were a good writer. And now that's not so much the case anymore. Like, that's why God made editors, like that's what they pay them the big bucks for, to make your writing better and more readable to the reader, because a lot of bloggers have become authors. And what happens is a blog post reads differently than an actual book. And that was a hard lesson for me. And yes, you get that manuscript back and it is full of comments and full of red ink. And I'm not going to lie, like, it's heartbreaking. It's like, this is your art. And somebody is telling you like, my interpretation was, here's how much you suck as a writer and look how hard you're making our job. But really, that's not the case. Like, they're helping you make this so much better. So it's been a process of doing my own work and really just leaning into, okay, these people are here to help me so that this project can be great. So anybody out there that's nervous about that, yes, it's a hard lesson, but please don't let that stop you.
I will raise my hand and say that I have like the outline of what I want to write about, and I probably could dump the content pretty quickly into it, from my head. But yeah, it's definitely like, who are you to think that you can write a book,
Yeah.
And that's partly kind of why we're here today, is to like kind of end that crappy cycle of thinking, right? And how to stop feeling like shit about yourself. So perfect.
So perfect segue. Yeah. Well, I want to say too that I think it's a myth that we can end that kind of talk. And I think, quite honestly, anybody that's selling you the notion of, completely stop your negative self-talk, or let's slay shame, and like, that's not happen. I think that negative self-talk is part of the human experience. I think that even with the birth of social media, I sort of half joke that comparing yourself to others is the thing to do on social media these days. And what I teach people to do is become so incredibly aware of what they're doing that is making them feel like shit. So the very first chapter is negative self-talk. Some of the other behaviors that your audience probably can resonate with are perfectionism, control, overachieving, maybe some self-sabotage in there sometimes, isolating and hiding out, numbing. And it's not about, this isn't a book like, here are the 14 things you're doing wrong, Allie, go and fix them. This is like, here are the things that we're all doing that are making us feel really crappy. Let's be so aware that we're doing them. So it's not all day or all week or all year that we're doing it, where it's just like a few minutes. And then you're like, oh, that was completely people pleasing, that email. And I don't actually want to do that project for you. And so then you can change your behavior and do things that are more in alignment with who you really want to be. That's what this is all about.
I love that. So, and feeling like who you are as a person. Like, I just did a horse session with one of my best friends that's becoming an equus coach. And I was just like the horse showed me the things that I was doing. So like, when I asked for something strongly, I would apologize for it. Like,
right.
Sorry that I have to be firm right now. And then like, I would always like touch the horse, like, I'm sorry. And it was such a awareness as to what I was doing. And I've been able to really step into stopping doing that. Like, not stopping, but like realizing when when you're in it. Do it. And preventing it from happening. So, yeah.
It happens to all of us. You're not alone. Speaking, I know you work with a lot of women, and we have been socialized to do that. We have been also socialized to think that women who, I have a whole chapter on people pleasing and approval seeking where I go into boundaries, and I think boundaries is like a buzzword, but nobody really actually, it's like this secret club where people actually know how to do it. It's like, we know we kind of should do it, but what does it actually look like? And so I go into detail about what it actually looks like. But I think it's a myth that many of us have adopted, that women who set boundaries are bitches. Or if you do set a boundary and are firm in it, then you have to be rude and aggressive and all these things that just aren't true about setting healthy boundaries. So that's another thing I want to squash.
Yes. No, I love that, because that is, I think, why I was constantly apologizing for it, is because I was like, I'm a sweetheart. I'm the nice girl. Like, I can't be like that. And there is a way to ask very politely and yet firmly stand in what you know to be true. So yeah, and it's always I think a learning process, right? So leaning into that, why do you think that you wrote this book for women? I mean, I know you talk to women all the time that are feeling like crap within themselves, but why did you write this book?
It became apparent, it's funny, I wrote my first book and it's like when you have a kid and you have a newborn and you're like, I'm good with this one. Like, I'm not doing this again. And I started paying attention. I started paying attention to not only my own behaviors, but the patterns I kept seeing in my clients. So my ideal client is I work with high achieving, smart women who have reached a level of success in their work life. So I don't just work with, I work with very few entrepreneurs. Most of my women are corporate women. Some of them are stay-at-home moms, but they've done, the job in the past, and they're at a level in their life where their personal relationships aren't a play. They're not a mess or failing. Sometimes they are, but they just want something more from those relationships. And so I started noticing that there was this pattern, and most of the women that came to me were numbing out either with booze, more specifically, drink a lot of wine at night, or work, a lot of workaholics, spending, and also they were hiding out and isolating a lot. And what I mean by that is when they were in struggle, they would, instead of reaching out to a female friend that they trusted and loved, they would either procrastinate on it or be like, oh, I'm too embarrassed to tell Alicia this. She probably doesn't have these problems. I'm just going to skip it. Or they wear a badge of honor that they can just soldier through it. Like, I can get through this. I've gotten through much worse before. It's going to be fine, which is actually creating this disconnection in your entire life and making you feel like shit. So again, I was paying attention to this, and it was the same things over and over again. And I just sat down one day and wrote them all out. And some of the habits are more common than others in the book, but there were basically 14 things that women were doing over and over again that were it was I kind of joke that it was like their to-do list, basically. Wake up, go to work, perfectionism and control, go home, isolate, numb out. And they didn't know what the solution was. And I know what it is. So that's why I wrote it.
And I think you also explained why you think women need this book, because of how they were feeling. So I guess you've said that it this isn't necessarily something that they can always overcome, but what does feeling the shame or feeling the neglect of their self-being have to do with these habits? What can they take from how they feel right now and shift it over by going through these steps?
Okay. So I think those are two different questions. So the first part is that, and I think it's important to mention, is we do these things because we think that they're protecting us. To be honest with you, overachieving allowed me to graduate with honors from college. Perfectionism worked for a while. And there's a saying in the rooms of 12-step programs that says it works until it doesn't. What they're talking specifically, if you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, they're talking about drinking. And that's the same thing with these behaviors. Perfectionism works until it doesn't. Isolating and hiding out works until it doesn't. Numbing out works until it doesn't. So when you are at a point where you're tired of that, where you're tired of constantly people pleasing and seeking approval from others. You're tired of perfectionism. That's when you get to a place where you know that it isn't working for you anymore. And so in a nutshell, the solution, there's a lot of kind of smaller tools and strategies and exercises I give in the book. But the two main sort of umbrella solutions are knowing exactly what your values are and knowing what they look like. So values is one of those things. It's kind of like values, that's boring. And don't we do that in like corporate training? And please, please, please hear me out. You know, it's one of those things where just to name your values isn't enough. That's like naming a child and saying that you're done parenting. Like, no, the real work comes in knowing exactly, like if you have a value around honesty and integrity, what is that going to look like when you go and do a job for someone, you sign a contract and they're doing something that is totally out of alignment with what you want to do? It's really like where rubber meets the road. You know, like, are you going to have that hard conversation? Are you going to set that boundary? Are you going to say, no, thank you, this isn't working for me? Are you going to turn down a 5-figure contract? So those are the types of things, these everyday situations where both outcomes suck. On one outcome, you keep doing the thing that's like against your value, or you speak up and take action that is in more alignment with your value, but it's uncomfortable. That's what I want people to know. I wrote a whole chapter about it in the book because a lot of people have never done values work. The other solution is having the people, I call them your compassionate witnesses. So these are the 1 to 3 people in your life where I'm certified in the work of Dr. Brene Brown. And for those of you watching that know her work, she says, sharing your story with people who have earned the right to hear it. So this is not like, you know, leaning into the barista at Starbucks and like telling her all your deepest, darkest secrets. This is the people that you know and trust who will be there for you, even if it's a relationship that you need to start to nurture again because you have lost touch or whatever the circumstances are. Those are the main 2 things that are important for getting a handle on all of the behaviors that I talk about in the book.
And, you know, it's like you have to start somewhere, you know. I'm guessing like you can't just like read this book and be like, I'm instantly cured, you know, like you have to start somewhere and kind of work your way through it. And, you know, maybe starting with that value and your integrity and stuff and really like getting that in check, you know, is a really good thing to do. I think our online world, I mean, you have an online business, I have an online business, some of this audience has online businesses. It's changing a lot, what has happened. And a lot of people were doing these things that were working until it doesn't, right? And they're starting to feel like crap because they're seeing this shift and they're not sure how to make the move with it, you know? And so it's interesting to like hear like some of the things that you're saying, like, oh yeah, I think people on all levels, no matter where it is that you are at and what you're dealing with, like can have some of these feelings in the book without even maybe necessarily realizing that is the key to what's making them feel like shit.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, too, like indirectly related, because I know your audience is entrepreneurs, mostly female entrepreneurs, is that I thought that having a successful business meant you had to know all the strategy in the world. And that was the key, right? That was going to be the key to my success. What I didn't realize, and I kind of went kicking and screaming in, was that my own like emotional healing, and I say like with that look on my face where I'm like, can you tell I wasn't excited? Emotional healing and my, you know, what we call mindset was probably more important than actual strategy, because you can have all the strategy in the world, Allie, and if you don't have, and if you have like upper limit issues, if you have imposter complex, if you're constantly have negative self-talk or compare yourself to others online, you're not only wasting time, you're holding yourself back. You're completely holding yourself back. And the women that I know who have sustained success, I don't want to just say success, because it actually, like, you have to watch the trajectory as well as the sustainability of it. Those women have worked on themselves. And I'm not saying that you have to work on yourself out loud like I do. You know, I have a podcast where I talk about my own stuff. I don't think so at all. It can be a very private matter for you. But I do know for a fact, I would bet all of the money I have in the bank plus Oprah's money, that your success is determined by how much emotional work you're doing on yourself. I honestly wish it weren't the case. I wish it was just strategy.
Well, and the action that they're taking on, you know, because yeah, like with that strategy, it's like, well, if you don't take action on anything,
yeah. Well, and then like what happens when you take action? You are inevitably going to either fail or succeed. And for many of us, we have a fear of sometimes both of those things.
Right.
I was just you were talking before we started recording, and I was talking about my book tour and how scary that is for me, because I'm equally afraid that no one will show up and that everyone will show up.
Right.
And of course, you know, we could talk about how that's so dichotomous, black or white thinking. But my point is that we many times have both the fear of failure and the fear of success. You know, success looks like, what if this actually works out? How can I sustain this? How am I going to top this year's revenue? What is my family going to think of me? I mean, raise your hand out there if you've ever felt like that. I have a huge fear around that, a core belief that if I get a certain amount of success, that that I'm going to leave my family behind, that I'm going to leave some colleagues behind. So it's like, you need to dig these up and get to the bottom of it so that you can be a leader and be the female entrepreneur / lady boss / amazing woman that you were meant to be. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's your inside reflects. Like I went through, you know, for like 20 years, I was constantly sick. Like always, there was always something wrong with me, to the point where people were like, "Are you a hypochondriac?" I'm like, "No, I'm not a hypochondriac. My body is really mad. I don't know why." And I don't know if it was 2015, I think it was, or 2016. My body like pretty much went into shutdown mode. And here, come to find out, I have severe food allergies that were making me very deathly ill. And, you know, I like in my head, I had let go of so much stuff in my business by being sick, that I was like, how can I ever start this again? I can never do this again. I can never pick up where I left off. Maybe I should just go get a job, you know? And it was like, wait. No, you haven't worked this hard to create all of this over a decade to just go get a job, you know?
Uh-huh.
So it did take so much thought work, and I was very private about what I wasn't private about like the allergies and stuff because, you know, of that, but like how I healed myself and lost 30 pounds in the process, and, you know, just had to go through all of these things inside of me that like I never really had to deal with in business, you know, like everything was just like, on to the next step, on to the next step, on to the next step, and never like hitting a wall so hard that like you crashed, you know? So it was like a good life lesson in, well, now I don't feel like shit physically.
Yeah.
Goodness for that. But, you know, then having to work on a lot of mental stuff in, you can do this. You can start again. You don't have to have 50 people in your program. Start with your one-on-one stuff, you know, and how could I get back to it in a way that made me feel good? And now it's like almost 2 years later, it's like, there's so much good opportunity happening that I'm like, whew, thank goodness I got through that darkness, you know, and did it. But, you know, for me, it was doing it more silently. And for you went through your own personal kind of crisis
Yeah.
when you were writing this book too, didn't you?
Yeah, when I was writing the book, I was probably about, I can't remember exactly, but I was more than halfway done with the book. I was maybe even 3/4 of the way through it. So my deadline, my manuscript was due December 31st, 2016. And my dad got sick at the end of September of that year and died on October 16th. And I flew back home. I live in North Carolina right now, and I was born and raised in San Diego, and that's where most of my family is, and where my dad was. And I flew back home to see him, and knew fairly quickly when I saw him. I had just seen him a few months before that, and he was a completely different person when I saw him. And it happened very quickly, which is many times over a blessing, because I know for lots of people that is not the case. It takes months and months and months for someone to pass away like that. And I had never lost anyone in my life, Allie. I had never even lost a pet. I was in for it.
Talking about it, like
yeah, I've told the story so many times now. Like my throat. It only if I tell like there's a couple particular stories that make me like, but I had never lost anyone before. I knew I was in for it, you know, and I went home, and the interesting part of the story is, and I was with him when he died, and my siblings chose not to be there. So it was just he and I. And what's interesting is that here I am writing this book about, here are all the habits that we do when shit hits the fan in our life. And like shit was hitting the fan in my life. And I thought to myself, like, am I going to eat my words? Am I going to fall back on these behaviors that I'm writing about and teaching people about? And the truth of it was that I did. Like, I spent some days completely isolating and hiding out. For 3 days, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I numbed out. I went to, as soon as I found out my dad was terminal, I got in the car, I drove to the mall, and I shopped for a dress and a pair of shoes for his funeral. Hadn't even died yet, but I just could not handle not having the perfect dress and shoes for my dad's service. That was control for me. That was numbing out and control. I felt good for like 10 minutes and I knew I was doing it. Like, that's the thing. It's like, I'm like, okay, this was conscious behaviors that I was doing to cope, because these are all coping mechanisms, right? Like, and anybody's watching live, like, type in, what is your biggest one? Perfectionism, people pleasing, self-sabotage, overachieving, control, compare and despair. Like, this is what we do because, again, we think it's protecting us. Our brains are so fascinating how they latch onto these behaviors and thought process. I geek out on brain science. And what I realized, through losing my dad during writing this book is that a couple of things. That yes, we're all human, and what's the matter? Is everything okay?
Oh, yeah. No. I was just to look at the comments, and then you were talking. I'm like, God, I'm going to distract her here. So I was like trying to turn my volume down as quick as possible.
Once I get going, there are no distractions. But one of the things was that I learned through all this is that we're all human when we all do these behaviors. So again, like, I want to just really underscore that this is not about stop doing all these behaviors. You're bad if you do them. You're wrong. No, we all do them. Again, it's like about awareness around them. And then also the other thing was that we don't, and this is, probably a conversation for another time, but just grief in general. I talk a lot about feeling your feelings in this book, not a lot about it, but somewhat. And that grief is like the thing that like everyone is like so uncomfortable about, myself included before this. And it's just, I also realized that our bodies, and you were talking about being sick, our bodies know what to do. And I just let that happen. There were weeks where I just wrote I could not finish the manuscript. I just like wrote really sad poetry about my dad. And that's what I needed to do to get through it. Mm-hmm. And it worked because I just allowed it. I got the word surrender tattooed on my arm 2 months after he died, because this was the ultimate surrender. And smart, high achieving women, we don't like that. We like to control it. We want a strategy. We want an itinerary. I want a guaranteed outcome. Anything other than that, I'm not interested. And for me, those are some hard lessons. Surrendering to what is, like you getting sick. Like, remember when you got your tooth knocked out? Like
disappointment for that today. Like, oh my gosh, we're still dealing with that situation. So
yeah. Hey, Julia, I see you're live. Yeah, surrender. So hard. So hard.
Put in some of the comments up there from Amber to perfectionism for sure, biggest personal issue. Yeah, same here. Perfectionist, OCD, you name it.
Perfectionism and control are sisters. They're not twins, but they are sisters. And that's why there's 2 separate chapters about those, because I think that if you are a perfectionist, you also struggle with control. And it's not always the other way around, though. I do know some people who struggle with control. Like I think I've successfully let go of a lot of my perfectionistic tendencies, but I still like control. My control manifests as planning. I want to, like, you should see my podcast schedule. Like, it's all dialed in, my whiteboard calendar. Like, I have to really be careful and like call myself out and just be like, Andrea, settle down. It's okay if you don't have your March 2019 podcast schedule.
A little bit of time.
Yeah. I just like to plan ahead. It makes me feel like I have safety. That's what it is. And that's what we all want. Like, as humans, we want safety. Of course we do. But, and I think that there's nothing wrong with that. But like, when does it start to really mess with you? When is it affecting your family? When is it affecting your health? When are you starting to obsess on it? Those are the things that you need to think about when you are just doing everyday life. I get fired up about this, clearly.
When you were talking about, okay, so you're talking about, with your dad and everything that you were going through, and like how you're writing about the very things that are happening in your life. And when I got sick, I had taken all of my courses and created something that I had never created before. And it was called A Game, how to be the absolute best in your business, to always be on your A game. And ironically, like 6 to 8 weeks into that program, that's like a year long, guess who was not on her A game? Guess who was sicker than she had ever been?
Oh my gosh.
Are you kidding me, universe? Like,
yeah.
Oh, but I now feel like, I mean, as things happen, like I've been able to go back and look at like, okay, how can I change things? And no, I don't always like you're right. Like it never goes away, but like how to deal with the stuff that you're been working through, or, like the issues with money that I've always had from things growing up, like those never go away, but like you can work towards them. And like today, right before we got on here, I was having a vision board thing with my A Game Mastermind members, and I had pulled out a piece of paper that was on my vision board that said 3 things that I wanted to accomplish, and I had completely forgotten about it because something was covering over it. And so I literally took it off there today, and I was like, wow.
Did you already do those?
Happened.
Yeah, I believe it.
Like one is like the one is like be 0 in debt, car included, and I'm like 2 to 3 months away from that, and I was just like,
yeah,
like I literally wrote those things down, forgot about them, put them away, in the back of that brain someplace. I mean, they were clearly still there, even right down to losing the weight that I wanted to. It's just crazy.
But you probably didn't lose it the way you originally thought you were going to, by having to like hit bottom physically.
And here's the ironic thing. I didn't work out at all. Besides my house dancing that I like notoriously do to get myself ready for the day, I wasn't out there running thousands of miles. I wasn't. Yeah. It was just like getting my body healthy, not eating the things that were inflaming my body and making me feel like crap every day. Like it was so crazy. And like there was food that I was eating that wasn't allowing my brain to achieve its optimal state. I know that's like.
Isn't that interesting that your body, because I believe that our bodies are the wisest part of ourselves. And your body was telling you like, hey, here's what you need to do to, be on your A game. And you like weren't listening. And then your body was like, hello. Yeah. On the ground, shut down. Yeah. I want to circle back to something else you said that I want to highlight. And that's about really, I forget exactly what you said, but it's about these behaviors and how they aren't something that we can totally heal and move completely away from. I think if anyone's selling you that, then I don't trust them. But it's about, I want to give you an example of what it looks like. So I got into an argument. I tell the story in the book. I got into an argument with my husband one time, and I left the house to drive and think. And I immediately started thinking about, okay, so meanwhile, I never in this argument did my husband say he wanted a divorce or anything even remotely like that. But I got triggered, and that's what this book is about, like knowing what your triggers are. I got triggered, and I immediately went into like worst case scenario. I even was like, well, we're probably gonna have to sell our house, this house I love. And, where would I live? I don't, and I'm going into planning. So for me, that was control, because it's easier and safer for me to try to think about control than to deal with the emotions that were happening based on this argument, deal with the pain of my abandonment issues and my daddy issues, that still come up. I think it's a myth that once we deal with, you go to therapy and you talk all that out and you're like, yay. And then, God damn it, you get in an argument with your partner. That thing comes up again. Yep. And so my point of it is that I realized it within about 15 or 20 minutes, what was happening. And that's what I want the win to be for women that read this book. Not that you completely stop doing it, but so that you notice quickly when you are people pleasing or performing or doing all this dog and pony show because we think it's protecting us, but it's actually not.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Like, and every scenario probably is going to trigger it differently each time you hit it. And like, one thing that I don't know, I probably implemented it a few years ago. I don't really know, but like, I used to be really reactive to people's emotions and what put on me, I guess you could
What
say.
you were making up about the situation based on words. Yeah.
Yeah, probably. So I started doing the whole 24-hour thing where it's like I take it in and then I walk away from it for 24 hours so that I can like decompress, digest, and not vomit out of my mouth words that,
Especially email, right?
yes,
That's
especially
the hardest.
and in business when it is just one thing, but text messages are kind of the same thing, like things can be taken wrong ways and stuff, and I just walk away, give it
Yeah.
24 hours, and then I'll come back to it and see how I feel. Sometimes I'll write my feelings down during that process because I realize that that's what helps me say this is what you are making this out to be and not maybe what they're making it out to be, because
Right.
that whole thing. But it's an always working thing. But I think what your book is going to provide to people is how to step into it and own it and then deal with it, right?
Yeah, step into it and own it, and also choose behaviors that are more in alignment with the type of woman that you want to be, that actually makes you proud, this courageous, confident woman, albeit uncomfortable. I'm not going to say that like kicking ass is comfortable all the time. Like kicking ass sometimes is failing, but you're showing up anyway, and you're reaching out to the right people when you do fall down. And that's being in alignment with your values and who you are.
I love it. I love it.
Me too.
Yeah. Is this why you wrote the book? I think so. So what is one of the solutions that you talk about in the book that like people can walk away from today?
Definitely, I would definitely, okay. I would start with negative self-talk. There's several. So I'll start with a easy/not easy one.
Yes.
I would start with self-talk. And what I generally have people do is break down the areas of your life, the different areas of your life, because sometimes it can be too overwhelming to think about your entire life. So these areas might look like career or job. It might be your partnership, your romantic relationship, your friendships. If you're a parent, that might be an area, your past, your body and appearance, because P.S., research shows us that as women, our body and appearance is the number one negative self-talk slash inner critic slash shame trigger for us, and your past and your future goals. So breaking down all those parts, and then write down, what does your inner critic say to you in those moments? So body and appearance, when you step out of the shower naked, catch yourself in the mirror, what kind of thoughts do you have? Or if you make a mistake at work, like maybe it's your yearly review and didn't go as well as you thought. Like, what is your self-talk? If you are at a place where you're in compare and despair, you're a female entrepreneur and like one of your colleagues is bragging about her 6-figure month, what is your self-talk? So all those areas of your life. And the reason is not to torture yourself. The reason is because if you don't know what is happening, you're basically like flying blind. I want you to know and get intimate with those negative thoughts so that you can not, and I might surprise you here, I don't think that I'm not a fan of telling people you need to just be self-compassionate. You need to turn those into positive thoughts. The women I know are so smart and ambitious, but you've been having a certain thoughts for decades. It's going to take you a minute to speak another language. My advice is to stop yourself and just use a neutral mantra. The one I use is I seriously tell myself, well, that just happened. That's it. That's it.
It's over.
I also say like, well, that's interesting information. So I'm basically just acknowledging, because this is this very scared part of you. This is the part of you that wants to keep you safe, that wants to not rock the boat. Like, this is a primitive part of your brain who is like, the world is dangerous. Don't go out there. And I'm not a fan of telling your inner critic to piss off or shut up. If that works for you, I have yet in my decade of doing this work to meet a woman who constantly berates and bullies her own inner critic and have that work for her.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. If it works for you, you be you. But I have found that just a neutral response of acknowledgement so that you can either change direction or, get rid of your trigger. For me, it's Victoria's Secret catalog. I never walk away feeling good about myself when I look at a Victoria's Secret catalog. So it's like those types of things, like don't do those anymore. If you can help it, know what your triggers are and avoid them. So that's just one tool I'd love to give people today.
And I can say, like, my inner critic, I am, believe it or not, am such an introvert. People are like, what? But every time my inner critic that I have to go be social, and I just totally like fessed on this on my Insta story. So if you were watching, like, it was kind of funny. But like my inner critic always wants to Netflix and chill. The house doesn't need to be sociable with anybody. We just stay in our hole and hide, you know, and I
call it self-care, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, you had to go be sociable for a meeting for 2 hours today. You should probably stay in. But what I have learned to like appreciate that I always want to have that thought and know that I should not always act on that thought. Yeah. That I really do have a good time when I leave the home and that it's good for my soul and my body and everything else. So, yeah. You know, but it did, I think it really did start too with the whole tooth debacle thing. Like it was so easy for me to be like, I am not putting in that retainer and talking to people all night. I'm staying home. And now I'm like, you know, kind of like really paying attention to what my body says and who I am and then dealing with it instead of just feeling like shit about it. And I think like what your breakthrough of this book really is for people.
Oh, thank you so much. And I saw a couple of the comments pop up and I appreciate so many of those. And I'm also offering a free book club for anyone that orders between now and when we start. So what I don't want people to do is read, because like raise your hand if you've read a self-help book. I so have, or bought a self-help book and never read it, or read it and you're like, that's nice. You like go about your life as usual. When I wrote this book, I was like, I don't want that for people. And I don't expect everybody to slam dunk all of the exercises that I have in here. And each chapter at the end has questions. And I had someone create beautiful PDF worksheets for those. And so I can give you the link, but there's a free book club that I'm guiding. I'm wanting to take people through this for accountability. And so they can ask questions and just so we can have a place where we can feel not so alone in acting this way and doing all these behaviors. And so we can have a plan to make 2018 the year that you actually honor the woman that you want to be.
Set that for you.
And I get an amen.
Hallelujah. That's a wrap. Talk about some awesome. Oh man, if this doesn't get people like excited about this book, I mean, come on, people, you can pre-order it right now. I've already got mine. I promise to not be one of the ones that orders and doesn't read it.
Well, the thing is that you don't have to read it in order. So read the introduction and then like whip through the table of contents and jump to the behavior that you have the hardest time with, like imposter complex. Yeah, I really struggle with that. Then jump to there. It does not have to go from beginning to end. And I specifically wrote it that way because I know self-help books can be like, oh man, like, you know, like just heavy and clinical. And it is not this way. People tell me that they love my writing because it's easy to digest and it's conversational. Like I'm your friend who's like, hey girl, you're doing this. Let's stop it. I do it too.
Yes. No, and I love that because like I like to skip. I like to like start at the back. Let me read that last chapter before I even get into it. I probably already watched the movie.
Totally fine.
So I love that about it and I cannot wait. So it hits bookstores January 2nd. Yeah. Like perfect timing, new year, new you.
It's available. Yeah, it's available for pre-order, which would be the most helpful, quite honestly. Pre-orders are so important to authors. And it's actually, my publisher said it's going to ship probably next week. So if you don't want to wait, you can order it, Amazon, Target.com, whatever. Or it'll be in, bookstores January 2nd.
And we'll put links below so that everybody can get access to it and pre-order theirs and maybe get an early Christmas present for that long trip that you got to take. You need a good book to read. So
exactly. Yeah.
Especially for Amber, who I'm with you. I'm not a huge reader, but I guarantee like Andrea is going to blow your mind. If she blew your mind in these 45 minutes, imagine an entire book of her. It's
also available in audiobook, Amber, if you're for anyone listening, available. And I read it. Anyone who, I love audiobooks lately.
It's your audio reading it?
Yeah, I went and read it.
Awesome. So cool. So cool. And this is like for Andrea. I mean, I think at the beginning of the interview, we talked about like you've been working on this a long time. And even before we came on live, you said this is bigger than a launch. And so for anybody that is thinking about, writing your own book, don't worry about the editing piece. I'm listening right here, and know that it is not something you're going to sit down and just do like that. It does take a long time and a lot of work. Andrea's been working on this for 2 years, and it's launching the third year, right?
It's the definition of a labor of love. It really is. Anyone out there who has a book that was dying to be born, please don't let the fear hold you back. It is scary. I'm not going to lie. But it's been like one of the biggest learning lessons for me and allowed me to have more success, not just because of the reach and the credibility and all that, and that's great, but because of the lessons that I'm learning along the way with this.
And that's, yes, lessons. Life is a constant lesson. And that is why, like, too, she says, you're not like getting everything from this book and you're not going to instantly heal. Like, you're constantly going to be learning, but you've got a guide with Andrea's new book, How to Stop Feeling Like Shit. So pre-order it. We will make sure that there will be links below it, below this video in the comments, so that you can get instant access to it. And thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you, Allie.
Yes, it was great catching up, and this software was so cool to do these live streams with. I hope that it's inspired me to do more. I hope. All right, everybody. I hope you have a happy Friday today. I hope you loved having Andrea here with us, and go get her book.
Thanks, everybody.
Soon. Yes. We'll see you later. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.